My best friend was my best man until he proposed to my wife during the reception in front of everyone. I still remember the way the warm autumn sun hit the windows of that grand restaurant hall on what was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Back then, I had no idea how everything could change in a single moment, how my closest friend could turn that day into a surreal nightmare by doing the unthinkable. I was standing beside my bride, the woman I loved more than anything, surrounded by friends and family who had come to celebrate our union. My best friend, the man I'd always called a brother, was right there too, officially standing as my best man. And yet, despite all the love and goodwill that filled that place, he would soon drop to his knees and propose to my wife in front of everyone, exposing feelings he'd been hiding for so long. It's been months since that day, but the memory still haunts me, especially on quiet nights when my mind wanders. Even now, looking back, I realized the small clues I had overlooked, the subtle warning signs that he was harboring emotions he could no longer contain. But let me start from the beginning, when we were just kids and everything seemed simpler. His name is Max. We met in high school in our junior year when his family moved to my neighborhood. I remember how at first I was intrigued by his quiet confidence, the way he seemed to know more about things than he let on. We quickly bonded over our mutual love for history and the odd sense of humor only teenage boys share. Once, during a snowy winter day, I slipped on the ice, scraping my knee pretty badly, and he didn't hesitate to help me up and walk me all the way to the nurse's station, even though it made him late for class. That moment sealed our friendship for me. I knew then he was the kind of person who'd stick around when things got hard. Our bond continued to grow after we applied to the same university. We ended up in adjacent dormitories, studying history together, pulling all-nighters before finals, sometimes broke and hungry, but always supporting each other. Max had an easy charm, but for a long time he avoided getting tied down in any serious relationship. He dated around, but none of his girlfriends stayed for long. Meanwhile, I was the romantic type who had big daydreams about finding someone special. When I finally met that special person, it was during a lecture on the history of the press, of all things. That's how I encountered Elena, the woman who would later become my wife. She was there because it was part of her journalism program, while I was there simply out of curiosity. She had a bright, effortless smile. I was instantly drawn to her. After the lecture, I forced myself to walk up and say hello. She seemed glad to chat, and the next thing I knew, I was texting her late into the night, talking about all kinds of topics. Books, movies, silly personal stories. I was amazed by how genuine she was, how easily she laughed, and how curious she was about the world. I remember rushing back to my dorm room, telling Max that I'd met this girl who might just be the one. He smiled that teasing smile and said something like, "You fall in love way too fast." But I saw in his eyes a spark of genuine happiness for me. A week later, I invited Elena to a small party at our place. I introduced her to Max, who was incredibly polite and charming toward her, though I noticed he was a bit quieter around her than with other people. At first, I assumed he was simply being considerate, letting me have the spotlight. Over time, the three of us hung out frequently, going to the university cafeteria for lunch, studying on campus lawns, going to the movies, that sort of thing. Max and Elena developed a casual friendship that I was actually happy to see. It never crossed my mind that there could be any deeper feelings involved. As the semesters rolled on, Elena and I got closer, moving from that early stage of dating into something committed. We moved off campus together, renting a small, slightly shabby apartment in a central part of town that made it easier for us to get to our respective classes and part-time jobs. Max came over often, especially when he was in between his own housing situations. We would stay up late eating takeout, or sometimes he and I would play video games while Elena watched from the couch. Sometimes I caught a glimpse of Max glancing at Elena in a thoughtful way, but I dismissed it as my own overactive imagination or basic admiration. He was my best friend, and she was my girlfriend. There was no reason to think anything more than that. I had my share of financial worries, working part-time at an archive so I could afford the rent. Elena was juggling classes and her own little gigs, writing for a student newspaper, interviewing local artists, doing volunteer reporting on student events. Max hopped from job to job, uncertain of what he wanted to do long-term. Still, even when he was short on money or stressed, he found a way to crack a joke, lighten the mood, or help me and Elena handle some logistical nuisance. He was a good guy, the best friend one could hope for. After graduation, Elena got an offer from a small local newspaper, while I landed a more permanent role at the city archive. Our schedules got busy, but we still found ways to spend time together. And then, at some point, I started thinking seriously about a life with her forever. She felt like my home, my anchor, my inspiration to be better every day. One night, we were just sitting on our ratty old sofa, watching some old black and white film, And something about the moment made me realize that I wanted to marry her. She was wearing these goofy socks, hair pulled back, no makeup, totally comfortable and unguarded, and that pure authenticity just swept me off my feet in a new way. The next morning, I told Max I wanted to propose. He burst out laughing, then clapped me on the shoulder and said something like, "I knew it, man. All right, let's do this. Let's find you the perfect ring." For about 2 weeks, Max and I scoured local jewelers and even took a short trip out of town to see other stores. It was exhausting and exciting. I still remember the day I finally picked the ring with a modest diamond I could actually afford. Max was giving me an odd look, like a mixture of pride and something else, but I was too focused on my own adrenaline rush to dig deeper into it. When the day came for me to propose, I put together a slightly cheesy but heartfelt scenario. I made Elena believe there had been an electrical issue, so I replaced the bright lights with candlelight all around our apartment. She loved the romantic vibe, and then, while we were listening to a soft tune on my phone, I got down on one knee. My hands were shaking, my voice cracked a bit, but I told her how much she meant to me and asked her if she would be my wife. I think I forgot half the speech I'd rehearsed in my head, but it didn't matter. She started crying, nodded vigorously, and whispered, "Yes, that was it." My world shifted in an instant. I was engaged to the woman I adored. Right after we hugged, I texted Max the good news. He congratulated me, told me he'd never doubted she'd say yes, and we set a time to celebrate with a glass of wine the next day. Looking back, I remember the subtle smile on his face that I might now interpret differently, but at the time, I just saw a supportive friend. From there, wedding preparations kicked into high gear. We chose a date in mid-autumn, hoping the weather would still be mild, with leaves turning golden for perfect photos. We booked a restaurant that overlooked a part of the city and had a lovely terrace for the ceremony. We found a band, picked out decor, figured out the seating chart. It was stressful yet thrilling. Max was instrumental in a lot of the planning too, from calling caterers to checking out venues with us. He insisted on being my best man, which seemed the most natural thing in the world. Occasionally, I'd notice he seemed uncharacteristically quiet, especially when we'd talk about how excited we were for the wedding. I'd ask if everything was okay, and he'd usually say he was tired or preoccupied with something about his own life. I never pried much, because I trusted him implicitly. A week before the wedding, we had a small bachelor party at a friend's cabin outside the city. Nothing wild. Just a few guys, a grill, some drinks, lots of reminiscing. By midnight, everyone was either half asleep or quietly chatting, except me and Max. We sat outside on the rickety porch, looking at the starry sky. I thanked him for everything. I told him he'd been the best friend I could ever have. He nodded, said something like, "You've always been a brother to me," but then sighed heavily. I was a little concerned, but chalked it up to the alcohol, and maybe the fact that he was not in a relationship while I was about to get married. The next few days were a blur of last-minute arrangements. Elena was handling half a dozen tasks, her own dress fittings, flower arrangements, everything. And I was running all over town for the final deposits and errands. Max was by my side for many of these tasks, sometimes carrying boxes or making phone calls while I tried on suits. I felt like everything was falling into place perfectly. The morning of the wedding, I was so nervous I actually felt dizzy. I got ready at my parents' place, and Max arrived early, wearing a crisp suit and a reassuring smile. We joked around as he pinned my boutonniere, telling me to breathe and enjoy the day. I remember him giving me this long, searching look before we left for the venue, as if he had something to say, but he remained quiet. When we reached the restaurant, the terrace was beautifully decorated with flowers and ribbons, with rows of chairs for our guests. The arch at the front was adorned with autumn leaves and soft white drapes. Family and friends took their seats, some greeting me and offering last-minute encouragement. Then came the music, the hush that fell over everyone as Elena stepped out in her wedding gown. She looked like every romantic dream I'd ever had. I felt my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear the gentle melody. She walked toward me, smiling through teary eyes, and my vision blurred a bit. Felt like a fairy tale. "We exchanged our vows under that arch," the officiant said the formal words, and we put rings on each other's fingers. People clapped and cheered. I was so full of joy I thought I might explode. In the wedding photos from those first moments, my grin is so wide I look like a different person. And if I look to the side, I can see Max, applauding with a half smile that at the time I interpreted as calm pride. We moved inside for the reception. The hall was elegant, with a long table for me, Elena, and our closest family, while guests sat around at smaller tables. There were candles, a small stage for the band, and a bar area. The moment I walked in with my new wife on my arm, the applause erupted again. People were raising glasses, giving toasts. My father joked about how I used to run around the house with a toy sword. My mother recalled how I once told them in kindergarten that I'd found the girl I would marry. though that was a different girl, obviously. Elena's parents expressed their emotion about their only daughter stepping into a new life. Then it was Max's turn to speak. He stood up, holding his glass, and at first it was everything a best man's toast should be. He shared stories about me and him pulling pranks in college, about how I once tried cooking chili and nearly burned down the dorm kitchen. He ended with a heartfelt statement about how lucky I was to find someone as wonderful as Elena. He also noted that I was like a brother to him, and that he'd be forever grateful to witness this special day. People cheered, and I felt a surge of love for him. The band started playing. We had our first dance. We let ourselves be swept up in all the congratulatory handshakes, the hugging and kissing from relatives, the laughter from old friends. It felt like everything was exactly how I dreamed. Lively, bright, the sound of clinking glasses, the swirl of dresses on the dance floor, the flash of the photographer's camera. Max wandered around, sometimes dancing with a friend of Elena's, sometimes talking to my dad. I barely saw him for a while, but I figured he was just enjoying himself. As the night advanced, the MC announced it was time to bring out the wedding cake. Everyone gathered around. The cake was enormous, 3 tiers decorated with delicate designs that mirrored the leaves of the season. Elena and I stood at the front of the room with the MC, ready to do the ceremonial first cut. People clapped. Cameras rolled. I felt Elena's hand on mine, pressing lightly as we poised to slice through the icing. Just as we finished that first cut, Max suddenly appeared in front of us, asking politely if he could have the microphone for a moment. I thought he had another wedding tradition in mind, maybe a funny story or a game. But then, in a hush that seemed to steal the music from the air, he turned to Elena, knelt down on one knee, pulled a small box out of his pocket, opened it to reveal a ring, and said, "Elena, I've been in love with you for a very long time. I know this is insane, and I'm sorry, but I can't keep it inside anymore. Will you marry me instead? Will you be mine, not his?" It felt as if the entire room had plunged into an abyss. The chatter died instantly. Everyone froze, as if trying to process whether this was some elaborate prank. Elena's eyes went wide, and her lips parted without any words coming out. My mind blanked for a few seconds, a swirl of horror, rage, and disbelief crashing over me. How could he do that? How could he be kneeling in front of my wife on our wedding day, ring in hand, telling her he loved her? I snapped back to reality and lunged at him, or at least I tried to step between him and Elena. I vaguely recall shouting something like, "What the hell are you doing?" My voice cracked with both fury and shock. Max looked up, tears in his eyes, insistent, even desperate. Some guests gasped. A few started yelling. Elena stood there, trembling, tears sliding down her cheeks. The MC tried to intervene, but I pushed him aside. I demanded, "Get up! This is my wedding!" Max just stared up at her, ignoring me. The next few seconds are a blur. I felt hands on my shoulders, pulling me back so I wouldn't physically attack him. Some of our friends had realized the tension might escalate to a fight. Max remained on one knee, repeating, "I'm sorry, but I have to say this. I love you. I can't go on living a lie." Elena finally managed to say something like, "What is wrong with you? This is my wedding day." Then she broke into sobs, turning away from him. It was as if time stood still. The mother of one of my friends was crying. My father was cursing under his breath. Elena's father tried to step in, his face contorted with anger. In the chaos, I tried to land a punch on Max, but 2 of my groomsmen held me back. Max was forced to his feet and dragged away, the ring box still in his grip. My mother was sobbing, asking why he would do something so cruel. But I didn't care in that moment how he felt, or what drove him to that point. I just kept cursing him, shouting that he had ruined my life, my wedding, all of it. Then I stormed out of the hall because I couldn't take the stares and the whispers. I found myself outside, in the dimly lit parking lot, leaning against a cold wall, trying to remember how to breathe. My mind was spinning with 1,000 questions. Had I missed something in the past months or years? Did Elena ever hint that Max felt this way? Did he think she secretly returned his feelings? Was I blind or naive to the possibility that his admiration was actually love? Soon a couple of friends followed me, trying to calm me down, telling me they'd never seen anything like it. I just kept saying, "I'm gonna kill him." But of course I was too dazed and humiliated to really do anything. Eventually, my father came out too. He put a hand on my shoulder, asked if I was okay, and I just shook my head, because what words can do justice to that kind of betrayal? After a few minutes, the door opened and there he was, Max, looking disheveled, face wet with tears, his tie undone. My friends tried to block him from coming near me, but I waved them off. I needed to confront him. I demanded an explanation. "What is your problem? You decide to declare your love for her now? In front of everyone? This is sick." He apologized, said he knew it was awful, but insisted it was the only chance he had left. He said he'd wanted to tell me or Elena before, but cowardice held him back. Now that she was officially married, he couldn't handle the finality of it. For a second, I thought I might punch him in the face, but something in me still recognized the confusion and desperation in him. That didn't lessen my fury, but it made me realize he truly was in some twisted form of love. This was no prank. This was his deeply misguided attempt to be honest. Eventually, some guys hauled him away, and he didn't resist. We parted with a flurry of curses and tears on my side, and a broken plea for forgiveness on his. Back inside, Elena was sobbing in a corner, comforted by her friends. Many guests, especially the older ones, had started leaving, the atmosphere irreparably contaminated. A few close friends lingered, apparently unsure what to do or say. We ended up serving some of the cake anyway. The band tried to pick up with soft music, but it felt forced and hollow. Elena and I half-heartedly cut into that big tiered cake, accepted a few hugs from the braver guests who stayed, and then we ended the evening prematurely. People left talking in hushed tones, exchanging worried glances. Our wedding day was effectively destroyed. That night, in the hotel suite we'd planned for our romantic first night as a married couple, we sat on the bed in silence. The dress was thrown over a chair. My tux jacket lay crumpled on the floor. Elena was trembling, tears drying on her face. Neither of us knew how to begin to process what had happened. Finally, she whispered, "Do you think I had anything to do with this? Did I unknowingly lead him on?" Her voice was so full of guilt. I told her I didn't think so, but I admitted that a part of me, in my darkest thoughts, was scared. What if she had feelings for him at some point? She adamantly denied it, insisting that her love had always been for me alone. I believed her, and yet the cracks had formed. The next few days were filled with calls and messages. Extended family offered condolences for the fiasco, some even making jokes like, "Well, you sure know how to throw a memorable wedding." But for me, it was a torment. Photos and videos circulated among my friends, capturing the stunned expressions and the final meltdown. Max disappeared for a while, or at least stopped contacting me. Elena tried to return to normal life, going to work, writing articles, meeting deadlines. I tried to focus on archiving tasks, but I was easily distracted by memories of him kneeling on that floor. I'd sit in my office, replaying the scene over and over, my anger momentarily overshadowed by heartbreak. Eventually, I decided to text him, though it was more an explosion of frustration than a measured attempt at dialogue. He responded with remorse, saying he was sorry for the pain he caused, but insisted that he still loved her. That made me so angry I almost broke my phone in half. I refused to engage further. Elena and I started avoiding talk about him altogether, but that felt like giving this incident free space to grow like a cancer in our relationship. We decided to face it head on. We spoke about it, cried about it, and came to the conclusion that our bond had to be stronger than this tragedy, or we would collapse under its weight. We even visited a counselor for a couple of sessions, which helped us articulate our trust issues and confirm that we wanted to move forward together. Despite the humiliations of that wedding day, Elena is still my wife. That's the bottom line. We are a family, working through each day in the hope that love really does conquer all, even the most painful betrayals. We took a short honeymoon, just a few days in the mountains, where we tried to create new positive memories. We hiked, breathing in the crisp air, reading books by a fireplace in a little cabin, forcing ourselves to remember that life can be beautiful. Bit by bit, that trip reminded me that our union mattered more than any show of misguided passion from someone else. I also felt a sense of relief that nothing beyond a silent longing had ever happened between Max and Elena. The counselor said it was possible Max had convinced himself that Elena secretly wanted him too, which can happen when unspoken feelings and illusions go unaddressed for too long. How strange it was to think that my best friend had lived in a secret fantasy world I knew nothing about. Of course, I lost a friend that day. When we parted, I told him I couldn't see a way to forgive him. At least not yet, and he seemed to accept that. In the months that followed, he moved, searching for new work. I heard tidbits. That he was depressed, that some days he regretted it, yet still didn't regret speaking his truth. And here's the weird part. As much as I hate what he did, there's a tiny corner of my heart that pities him, because love can be a powerful, destructive force when it's not reciprocated. And he clearly lost his grip on how to handle his feelings. That doesn't excuse the betrayal, but I can at least see the twisted logic that led him to choose my wedding day as his moment to unleash his confession. Nevertheless, our friendship is shattered. Elena and I moved past the initial storm, but the memory is ingrained in me. People continue to talk about it, especially whenever someone new sees our wedding photos and wonders why the reception was so sparsely photographed. I used to think that once I got married, that day would become a perfect, sparkling memory, a day to cherish forever. Instead, it's become a bizarre mixture of happiness and heartbreak, overshadowed by the dramatic fiasco. Still, I look at Elena each morning and know I'm lucky. She's there with me, my wife, the woman who said yes to me, not him. We have weathered a trial that some couples might not overcome. Over time, It has brought us closer in a strange way. We've become more honest and open because we never want hidden feelings to fester into something that explodes unexpectedly. Some nights, we talk about having kids, getting a bigger place, forging new traditions. Occasionally, the subject of Max's betrayal creeps in, but now it feels more like a cautionary tale, something that reminds us how important it is to communicate constantly. Will I ever fully forgive him? I don't know. Right now, I've got the scab, and it still itches if I pick at it. Perhaps, years from now, we'll run into each other, talk about all the lost time, or maybe I'll never see him again. Part of me actually hopes he finds a way to be happy, far away from us, so that none of us have to revisit that day. Another part of me remains bitter, recalling how he stole a piece of my joy that can never be replaced. Ultimately, though, my wedding day isn't defined solely by his act. It's defined by the love that Elena and I share, our willingness to remain united when life throws the most unexpected challenges at us. Yes, it was a brutal lesson, a tear in the fabric of trust I had in a man I once called brother. But it also proved that no matter how blindsided I might be, I can and will defend what matters most. Sometimes I replay the image of him kneeling in front of Elena, that ring box in his hand, and I feel a pang of anger, a surge of humiliation. But then I look at my ring finger and remember that I am the one she vowed to spend her life with. I am the husband she chose, and that's the reality, no matter how dramatic his gesture was. In the end, I learned that real love, true commitment, isn't just about flowery words or public displays. It's about choices we make each day, about facing the worst moments and still choosing each other in the morning. Elena is my wife, and if I have any say in it, that's how it's going to stay. That's enough for me. Now, whenever someone asks about our wedding, I either give them the watered-down version or I brace myself and tell them the truth. My best friend was my best man, until he proposed to my wife in front of everyone. Then I watched their eyes pop out of their heads, and I realized that sometimes truth is far stranger than fiction. But at least I get to walk away from that conversation hand in hand with the woman I love, which is all that really matters in the end.